We as college football fans, especially Big Ten fans, always hear that Wisconsin, Penn State, and or Michigan, either one of them or all three of them, that this season or how many other seasons ago, they always have the opportunity to go to the next level and finally win themselves a Big Ten championship and maybe even reach the playoff. And they never, ever seem to do it. But I do still believe that these three teams are the teams to beat Ohio State sooner rather than later, unlike the rest of the conference. I believe that each one of these teams carries one quality that in the end all add up to three main qualities that are needed to consistently compete in the Big Ten, or rather consistently dominate the Big Ten. I'm also going to explain why I think these teams haven't had success recently in beating Ohio State. So let's get right into it. So first of all, you have the worst of these three. You got Michigan. Michigan, looking at their talent, talent is one of the major points that I think is needed to beat Ohio State. They have the best talent by far out of Penn State, Wisconsin, and themselves. They have the closest gap to close with Ohio State when it comes to talent. They have not won a conference title since 2010, and they only have a 10% winning record against top 10 teams. So Michigan here is the ultimate underachiever. They have done very well recruiting, but they've very poorly applied it on the field. Michigan, since Harbaugh has came, their ceiling has been 10-3. They had two 10-win seasons at first, then a disastrous 8-5 season, another 10-3 season with a disastrous 2-game loss ending, which the average of all three of those defeats in 2018 was by almost 3 touchdowns. And then you get to 2019 and 2020, and Michigan is just at this seeming point of no return. And in the end, it all boils down to coaching, specifically a good head coach, and scheming. Assistant coaches kind of apply in all of the areas. Assistant coaches revolve around talent, scheme, and the head coach. So Michigan's head coach is not, in my opinion, not anything special. At best, he's above average. At worst, he is average. And I'd say that is a pretty factual statement. He has never won a conference title in his college Division I FBS coaching. Never won a conference title. Also, he refuses to adapt to the spread or any scheme that works. Rather, he just decides to physically pound it up the middle against every team he faces, thinking it's still going to work. So Michigan has major issues with scheme and with the head coach and even with the assistant coaches. I mean, Don Brown fell off. Tim Drevno, Harbaugh's offensive coordinator from 2015 to 17, was a below-average coordinator, very poorly managed games, commanded one of the worst offenses probably in the history of Michigan football in 2017, and even Jim Harbaugh, the head coaching, not hiring an OC and being his own offensive coordinator in 2018 shows some of the poor management skills he has in college. So Michigan has the advantage in talent, but they are lacking in scheme and coaching. And speaking of scheme, Penn State is the team that embodies proper scheme. Penn State has had more consistent stats on offense and in defense than Michigan has ever since the year 2016, which is what I like to call like the beginning of absolute Ohio State dominance. Since 2016, Ohio State has either been to the playoff every year or reached not every year, but you get the point. They've either been to the playoff or won the Big Ten championship game, or both, every year since 2016. And It really just speaks to the lack of cohesion that these three teams, Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin, all have, because they've had multiple opportunities to beat Ohio State since the year 2016, and none can do it. But back to Penn State. Penn State has the second best talent out of Michigan themselves and Wisconsin. They only have an 11% winning record against top 10 teams, and they have won a conference title since 2010. They won it in 2016. So they're better. They're not as underachieving as Michigan by any means. However, they're nowhere close to being elite. They haven't reached the playoff. The year that many said they should have, in 2016, they ended up losing their bowl game to a 3-loss USC. They had very close calls, games that they should have easily won, where they were leading by 2 touchdowns or more against Ohio State and other teams, and they lost those. They should have reached the playoffs in 17. They shouldn't have bottomed out the way they did in 18, but they did. 19, in my own opinion, looking at some of their closer games, was kind of a mirage for their fan base, in the same way that 18 was for Michigan, in the same way that maybe 2017 was for Michigan State, and this year was the same with Michigan, the year of being exposed. It exposed the lack of depth, the lack of application of talent and scheme, and the lack of coaching, both head coach and assistants this year. That's why Penn State started out 0-5, but the scheme is why they finished 4-0. Because they have a superior scheme, a scheme that most closely matches Ohio State and can compete with Ohio State's in the spread. So Penn State has the best chance with the realm of scheme, and what other teams can learn from this, you can't really learn much from Michigan's talent. That's mainly just tradition among with Harbaugh's personality. But what teams can learn from Penn State's scheme is just to adapt it. It's obviously worked. They're the only team that's beaten Ohio State since. And while there may not be the most amazing coordinators that can run the spread, you can certainly do a service to your team and adapt if you can. And mainly I'm talking about Michigan. Now, in the case of Wisconsin, who's up next, Wisconsin has probably, I'd say, the best head coach out of all of these teams, and pretty good or equal assistants. But the issue is, relating back to talent, in order to adopt the spread, you have to have good baseline talent, and Wisconsin has only gotten that in the past year or two, and they're not getting talent that's necessarily tailored to that scheme. And maybe with Barry Alvarez retiring, Wisconsin can adapt to more of a passing-oriented offense, and maybe they'll want to make that jump, but that would take certainly a transition, and that'd be a feat for Wisconsin to achieve. Wisconsin's average recruiting ranking since 2010 is only number 38. They really don't get a huge deal of talent. Their record against top 10 teams, though, far better at about 28-29%. It's more than double of Penn State and Michigan. It's almost triple, in fact. They're just a far more effective, overachieving team. Now, they haven't beaten Ohio State recently, but they don't face them every year. And from what I can, and Paul Chryst has only faced them, he's faced them 4 times, and he's had opportunities to beat them, and credit many, like half of those losses, if not more, were his fault. But still, a lot of that does revolve around talent. And if he did have that talent, he'd probably have, a 3-1 record against them. He's come just as close as Michigan has, closer in many circumstances, with a third of the talent, which is amazing. Wisconsin is, in my opinion, by coaching, the best team. Now, what other teams can learn from this, not often. It's pretty hard. There's only so many people who can overachieve in the way that Paul Chryst does, but I think what other teams can learn, like Penn State and Michigan, is just be willing to put pressure. Because if Paul Chryst can do what he's doing at Wisconsin, Penn State and Michigan should already have been to the Big Ten title game 2 or 3 times, or at least like twice, and they should have at least reached the playoff once, in my personal opinion. There needs to be more accountability, especially for Michigan, who hasn't won anything. Penn State's at least won something. So do I think any of these 3 teams will finally get it all together with these 3 skill sets that I think are necessary? If there is a team, I think it's Wisconsin. Michigan and Penn State are in weird, different kinds of limbo, but they're both, in my opinion, in this limbo. Franklin has more of an invincibility card than Harbaugh has, since Franklin came after a scandal in which Penn State was partially rebuilt by Bill O'Brien. Franklin rebuilt it up. Honestly, Franklin could go 10-3 every year, 9-4 occasionally, and no one would ever touch him. Harbaugh can't do the same thing. But scheme is probably more important in today's game than talent is. Same thing with coaching. So, in all honesty, it's really a toss-up between Penn State and Michigan for which one of those will go forward. So far, Franklin has been closer, but if Michigan, let's say, fires Harbaugh and hires Matt Campbell, the tables completely, or someone else, the tables completely turn. I think it's safe to say it's Wisconsin. That might change if they continue to have this weird mediocre set of years that they have had. But that's just my thoughts on what you need to do to beat Ohio State. And if you're a fan base of any Big Ten team, it looks very grim because reverse engineer it back. All of these teams are lacking major skill sets and just qualities that you really need to even compete with Ohio State on a yearly basis. It's Ohio State's, essentially, the Big Ten is Ohio State's club to run. It's a child playing with a Lego set. Ohio State's the child, the Big Ten's the Lego set, and the kid just continues to beat on it and crush the pieces and chew and spit out the pieces. That's what the Big Ten is. And if any team wants to compete with Ohio State, in my opinion, need to adopt at least 2 of the 3 qualities, which I don't think really any team has done. And if they want to win titles on the regular, have to adopt the 3 out of the 3. And not even that, you got to be consistent with it. Keep your head coaches in check. Just really a lot revolving around accountability as well, especially in the case of Michigan and Penn State. That's all I have for today. If you've reached this far into the video, remember to like and subscribe. Another video on this will be coming out in the following week. I like to talk about the Big Ten in relation to Ohio State. This is just kind of continuing my first take on this, which I published about a week ago. I'm probably going to be focusing more on breaking news and then tying it into this rather than just doing a report. But again, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video around. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.